Hello, Bobby Torres of Frightbox Recording here, and welcome to Fixing It in the Mix, Part 1. So within this week's 3-part video series, I'm gonna be diving back into some old mixes of mine that weren't that great, and I'm gonna be showing you how I can go about fixing certain elements within those old mixes with the skills that I possess today. And in today's video, we're gonna be talking about fixing guitar tone. I have a mix here that I recorded way back in 2010 that features some not so stellar elements within the mix. The song is cool, but I just didn't do a good job with the actual source sounds and just mixing the song in general, especially the guitar tone. So with that being said, I'm gonna play the song back. Let's take a close listen to the guitar tone, then I'll solo it, we could dive deep, and then I'll show you how I go about fixing it.
I see you in my dreams, full of hope I wait for you each night. Your hands are soft, your skin so very clean. In your hands my heart, laughing as the blood drips down your arm. As long as you live, you will never.
So as you can hear, not the greatest mix in the world. I hear issues with the drums. The vocals sound cool, but I definitely hear some issues with the overheads and definitely the guitar tone. Now, when I solo the guitar tone, you could probably hear that it sounds very muffled and just artificial and almost like a really bad amp sim. Now, as far as the track count for my rhythm guitars, you're gonna see 4 tracks, but in reality, it's only 2 performances. I have an amp sim, or more specifically, the pod, taken from an old Pod XT Live on the left side and right side. And I'm also trying to add clarity to this not that great tone by blending in a DI signal. It's sort of helping, but what it sounds like to me now anyway, is just a muffled guitar tone mixed with a clean guitar tone. And it ain't working. Now I have these 4 tracks bussed to a rhythm guitar submix that I think has a little bit, yes, it has a little bit of C4, which is a multi-band compressor. It's there just to control some of the palm mutes, which is a good thing. But I find that the tone itself and the way I EQ the tone, again, just isn't working. And let's look at some of the EQ that I have on these tracks. For my main distorted tone, let's actually listen to just the distorted tone without the DIs and hear how it's sounding. So yeah, it just sounds really muffled and strange, and the reason is I'm just going way too crazy with the EQ. So if you look here, I'm rolling off all frequencies below 90 Hertz, which is generally pretty good, and I'm rolling off all frequencies above 5K, which is pretty extreme. And I'm also doing a bunch of cutting in the mid-range, and as we know, guitar tone generally lives in the mid-range. That's where the fundamental frequency range of a guitar tone exists, and I'm doing nothing but cutting that range, which really doesn't make much sense. I remember at the time I was obsessed with smoothing out my guitar tones, and I would just over EQ things and try all this fancy trickery like blending in DIs to try and help clean up the tone, and this was usually the result. And honestly, this is probably as good as it was gonna get with this technique that I was using here. I had the exact same process happening on both sides, and I'm also compressing my guitars slightly, which for me, nowadays, it's just pretty unnecessary. Guitars are already pretty compressed in a mix. If you actually look at the waveform, any distorted guitar, whether it's coming from an amp sim or a live amp, is gonna look pretty compressed. Now, some producers do like to compress their guitars, which there's nothing wrong with. A compressor can add a nice character to the guitar tone. But in today's video, I just want to dial in a nice, solid, straightforward, heavy guitar mix. So let's hear how that tone actually sounds with nothing added at all, where it's just the guitar tone. I'm actually gonna even bypass the multi-band compressor here. Now let's hear the tone that I was working with way back in 2010. So as you can hear, you could probably tell why I over EQ'd it. To me, that just sounds like a buzzsaw. Now, I was using the Pod XT Live. This is before amp sims were readily available in the computer. And when they were available back then, they just ate up too much CPU. So I used to use the Pod XT in the studio a lot. And although that thing was capable of producing great tones, this was not one of them. Now, like I said, on top of that, I also blended in a secondary DI tone, which is just a clean DI signal. There are two amp sims here, but they're actually bypassed. And let's hear what that sounded like on its own. So as you can tell, they sound very lo-fi, and that's because I was trying to bring out more meat in the mid-range and help add clarity to the mid-range by rolling off all the frequencies, I guess around 260 Hertz, and all the frequencies above around 2K. I'm also compressing the cleans to keep them less dynamic, because remember, clean guitars are gonna be more dynamic than distorted guitars. And the result, as you heard earlier in the video, just wasn't that great. It just sounded like an oversaturated, harsh tone mixed with a clean tone. Not what I was going for. So the question is, how are we going to fix this guitar tone? Well, I have good news for you. It isn't going to be hard. Now, luckily, most people involved with heavy music production or rock production are in the habit of tracking DIs. As you could tell, I was back then, way back in 2010. And what's great about DIs is that you could shape them into any guitar tone that you want. And in this production, I have these DIs that I can work with. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna kind of start from scratch. Actually, let's just hear the DIs without any EQ or compression to see if they're workable. They sound nice and clean. It was just a guitar plugged into a DI box that was recorded straight into an old Digimax LT interface. Sounds like fresh strings are being used, so I think we're gonna be able to dive in and create a nice solid guitar tone and fix this guitar mix. So first thing I'm gonna do here is I'm actually gonna make two new tracks, two blank tracks, and I'm gonna name it New Tone L and New Tone R. Now let's pan these guys out to the sides, and I'm gonna copy just my DI tracks from the original performance to these brand new tracks. Okay, now let's start with an amp sim. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick a completely free amp sim. I'm gonna pick the Amped Roots plugin by ML Sound Lab. You can download this plugin for absolutely free. I'll leave a link below in this video's description. And yeah, I'm gonna choose this amp sim because it's free. And also just to show you that you could achieve amazing tones with free tools. You don't need to spend a lot of money. Okay, so we have the Amped Roots plugin. I'm gonna copy it to both tracks. I'm gonna pull up just my own settings here, which is very basic. Gain set at around 6, very simple EQ settings. I got the lows about 3/4 of the way up, the mid-range just shy of halfway up, the highs a little past halfway, and the presence a little bit more, almost 3/4 of the way up. For my pedals, I'm just using a little bit of a noise gate and a little bit of a tube screamer, and that's all. So the magic here though is in the impulse response that I'm going to use. And I'm actually gonna use an impulse response of an SM57 on a Mesa Boogie cab. If you look here, I have 8 impulse responses from my Guitar Impulse Response Octapack, and I'm gonna keep it simple and just use impulse response number 1, which is an IR of an SM57, and I'm gonna use it on both of these tracks. And let's hear the resulting tone without any EQ and how it's working on its own as it stands right now. So right off the bat, we have a nice, warm, natural sounding guitar tone. We don't even have any EQ on these guitars right now. And by the way, if you dig this tone and you want to make your life a lot easier and just get right to dialing in a great tone at the source with any amp sim that you're using, you could download this exact same Octapack that I'm using for absolutely free. There's a link below in this video's description. The IR pack comes with 2 SM57s, 2 SM81s, 2 Sennheiser E609s, as well as 2 Electro Voice RE16s. 8 solid impulse responses and a ton of variety to choose from when dialing in a guitar mix. So right now, let's see how these guitars are working in the mix, again, with absolutely nothing applied to them at all. No compression or no EQ. Let's check it out.
I see you in my dreams. I wait for you each night. Your hair so soft, your skin so very clean. In your hands, my heart.
Okay, I like what I'm hearing, but I want to shape the tone a little with some basic EQ. So I'm going to pull up just a stock EQ plugin in my DAW. I'm going to roll off all of the low end that we don't need, so all frequencies below around 80 Hertz. And I'm gonna roll off all of the super duper highs that we don't need, all frequencies around, let's say, 10K, just to get rid of a lot of that fizz in the upper harmonics that we don't need, even though the impulse response that we're using has very, very little fizz because it was recorded right in the first place. Okay, I'm gonna copy that EQ over and let's hear the tone in solo. So aside from the low pass and high pass filter, I'm just pulling out a very, very small amount of lower mids, around 700 Hertz by about 1.5 dB, and a little bit at around 1.5K, around 2 dB. The reason why is this mix just has a lot of information in the mid-range, very mid-rangey drum sound that really needs to be fixed. But anyway, and a lot of mid-range in the bass guitar. So I felt there was a little bit of a buildup in that area, and I'm just pulling out ever so slightly, just a little bit in the guitar tracks. Now, if you look at the EQ on my original guitar tracks, let's go back to that. As you can tell, I'm pulling out way too much and it didn't help the already not that great tone. So with that being said, let's go back and listen, just for the sake of comparison, to the original guitar tone that I had in this mix in solo. Let's check it out. Very odd, it even sounds kind of out of phase with the clean DIs. And now let's hear the new guitar tone, which was dialed in with a free amp sim and a free IR pack. Pretty cool tune. It's a shame that the mix wasn't that great back then. So as you can see, it wasn't rocket science when it came to fixing my guitar tone. I already had DIs to work with, which most people have at their disposal these days when dialing in a production, because most people are recording straight into their interfaces, which is the same thing as recording a DI. So instead of me going in there and fighting with EQ and trying to pull something decent out of that terrible guitar tone, or trying to, overcomplicate the process by blending in a clean DI that's not really in phase with the original tone, I just kept it simple, used the DIs, again, just loaded up a free amp sim plugin, added a decent impulse response, a tiny bit of basic EQ, didn't even use compression, and I have a workable professional guitar tone in the matter of minutes. So I'm curious to know, do you struggle with fixing guitar tones in your mix? If you do, leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your opinion. If you found this video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And do not forget to click the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload weekly videos on all things metal and rock production. Now, if you're looking to improve the sound of your mixes, the truth is the best way to get good at mixing is to mix a high volume of different music, sort of like what we're doing here this week in this video series. And on the topic of that, next week I'll be opening the doors to my Frightbox Mix Crypt community. I only open the doors to this community once or twice a year. In the program, we mix a brand new song every single month, multi-tracks included, so you can mix the song yourself. And again, you get to mix a new one every single month. And you also have access to our entire back catalog of multi-tracks, songs, and masterclasses. Again, a brand new song every single month, as well as an exclusive masterclass by me where I break down my mix of the song in great detail every month. And on top of all of that, you'll have access to our private Frightbox Mix Crypt community. In the community, we share each other's mixes and offer feedback to each other. And there's also a live group coaching call with me at the end of every month. If this sounds interesting to you, there's a link below to the Frightbox Mix Crypt waitlist. Join the waitlist and you'll be notified when the doors open next week. And be sure to catch part 2 of this video series on Wednesday on YouTube, where we go about fixing a terrible bass guitar sound. Till next time, happy mixing.